Hello. Our next speaker is Joe Anderson, who is the COO at Reliability X, and he will be discussing ways to show economic value of the lubrication program. You can find out more about him and connect in the speaker profiles.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started here. Give me a second here. All right. Okay, thank you for everybody for being here. I really do appreciate you taking the time out to attend this, and I'm really thankful. I know I have some stiff competition ahead of me with the other two presenting, so I hope that you get some value out of this today. And if you have any questions, just visit our sponsor page at Reliability X and reach out, and I'll be more than happy if I don't answer your question during the Q&A to get to it. So I'm hoping to take about 20-25 minutes of your time so we can get to the Q&A. So I might go through this rather fast. I have a habit of elaborating on points for a little too long and time runs out. So just bear with me. But today we're going to talk about ways to show the economic value of your lubrication program. What I mean by that is basically dollar value. Now, there's multiple ways in which your lubrication program adds value to the organization, and I'll touch base on some of those things. But I think the most important piece is the communication piece. And so who is Reliability X? Again, we're about people, and we understand that the education and knowledge of people is the most important thing in order to gain value within an organization. They've already introduced me. I have a bunch of certifications. I've been in the industry over 25 years, mostly as a practitioner. A few years ago, we formed a business and went on our own. I mostly sat as a maintenance manager and up into the corporate levels of maintenance and asset management. So to get started, what I want to start with is an understanding of terminology. And the key to adding value to an organization is about effectiveness. A lot of things can be gained on the efficiency side, but what I want to do is is break down some terminology so that you understand. We interchange the terms effectiveness and efficiency when they're actually quite different. And so effectiveness is about doing the right things. So for example, when it comes to lubrication and setting up a lube program, it's a set of micro processes within the lubrication management process, and adhering to those processes. That's the effectiveness piece. It's doing all the right things. So for example, lubricant control and receiving, how do you allow dirty oils to come into your facility? Are you working with suppliers to get the oil cleaner? Do you have filtration as it incoming in your storage and things like that? When it comes to lubricant application and all the tasks, filling the oils or doing oil changes or flushes, are you following best practices as to not contaminate oil and things like that, or contaminate samples? You also have contaminant exclusion, which is one of the most important pieces, is how do we keep contaminants out of the process, as well as, which machines do we slate for what we're going to do oil analysis on, or how we're going to treat lubrication. Are we going to do precision lubrication through ultrasound, or are we going to train operators through AM on certain non-critical components to do lubrication? Those types of things. Of course, your sampling, your storage, disposal, and of course, leak and spill management. So a good example here for driving value back to the organization, let's just take leak and spill management as a process. Okay, if you were to, at least in the United States with regulatory requirements, dump oil down a drain and it's found out, and you don't contain the spill, and it can become very costly for an organization. Okay, and so the value back to the business is that you have this process in place so that you don't incur those fees and you reduce risk, okay, which has a monetary value, but it also has a social impact on the business from a PR perspective. If you're known for one that claims to take care of the environment, but you're contaminating it at the same time, people see that as hypocritical and you can lose customers. So there's a value impact to the business for having all the right things in place. When it comes to efficiency, efficiency is about making a process or a system better, with the least amount of waste and time and effort. The problem with interchanging the words effective and efficient is effectiveness by its own definition is about doing the right things. With efficiency, I can be doing the wrong things, but I can still make those processes more efficient and maybe even still make some gains. For example, if I were to dump that oil down the drain, and that was a common practice, that's not a right thing to do. But if I wanted to become more efficient, maybe I use a funnel to make sure every drip of that oil goes down the drain, right? And so by doing so, I've made that process more efficient, but it's still not the right thing to do. And so maintenance programs as a whole are a subsystem of the organization. And within maintenance, there's about 15 processes that make up the maintenance function. And so understanding what are those effectiveness pieces, what are those 15 processes, are the right things to do in order to have a robust maintenance program. And so another key here, once you understand this, is don't sell yourself short. The way that I look at things, and I'm talking from a maintenance manager perspective. So if you're below or above that level or whatever, find a way to adapt what I'm saying to your level. But the thing is that when they hired you to be the subject matter expert. That's the reason why you got the job. Okay. And a lot of times we are very poor at communicating the great things that we do. And a lot of times it's because we're on defense all the time because we're getting, attacked or getting blamed for things that are going on. And so that consumes a lot of our time. But again, asking permission to do something, in my opinion, just isn't the way to go about doing it. I mean, you're the subject matter expert. You go out and execute on what you know is right, and what are those effectiveness pieces that need to be in place in order for you to be effective. And then giving yourself and your team credit can be one of the most difficult things to do because a lot of us don't like to brag. We see it as bragging about the good things that we're doing. And we don't like to toot our own horn and those types of things. And I think that's a detriment. And that's where the biggest gap is, I think, in a lot of these organizations is they don't understand what it is you're doing and what are the good things that you're doing to contribute to the value of the business. And so giving yourself credit, sending out emails, letting everybody know, posting things on boards, even creating newsletters or things like that to send out to the organization, letting them know all the great things you're doing is a great way. And so the goal in selling economic value is you have to establish credibility. Okay, and quick wins are the biggest key for developing credibility within the maintenance department. And you win people over by doing things that get results. And so, for example, adding single point lubers or auto lubers. If you went through all your PMs and wrote down the number of PM tasks and the time it takes to complete those tasks when it comes to lubrication, there's a huge value there that can offset the cost of putting in single point lubers and auto lubers. And that's a win because you're almost error proofing things by putting in single point lubers or auto lubers. And the goal is if you can remove manual labor from it, you save labor dollars, but you also standardize, which is a way to mistake proof things. Next thing is adding breathers to gearboxes and pumps. This is a huge one. I see this in a lot of facilities that I go into. You'll see leaking seals and oil leaks and things everywhere. And a lot of times they don't even have the proper breathers on them. And so the weakest point in your gearbox, as the oil starts to pressurize due to heat with all the friction generated and the load on it, that pressure's got to go somewhere. And if you don't have a breather on it, the weakest link in that gearbox are your seals. And so it blows out the seals. A lot of times you'll see the front seals are blown on a gearbox when you pull a motor off and things like that. And a lot of that is because you're not putting breathers on. So that's a way to get quick wins and to document the savings that involve. For example, if a gearbox fails every 5 months because of a blown seal, what does that cost you? And then if you can mitigate that over a period of time, that's a savings back to the company. So it can be documented. Right? Another thing is, and the most important thing to me, is training maintenance and operations staff. I'm huge on training the operations staff. At most of the facilities that I worked at, I not only trained my maintenance folks, but I would train operations in at least a lubrications fundamentals course or something like that. But I tried to get most of them certified. I use ICML as my certifying body, so a lot of them would be MLT1s at the operator level, and then I'd push my maintenance guys to advance past that and provide that support. Because with that knowledge comes an understanding of how to become more reliable. And the more reliable you become, the more value you bring back to the organization. And then another quick win is oil and grease analysis. Oil analysis is probably one of the most important tools to utilize, especially on critical equipment. but also doing a grease analysis. So we used to do an analysis on our robot gearboxes, which were grease packed, because we would want to understand, not only the condition of the grease, but the wear components within those gearboxes to keep our robots running. And so by doing that, it allowed us to find defects and eliminate defects, and in turn returns financial value back to the organization through, not losing time or gaining availability. So a goal would be to look for some quick wins. These are some quick wins. But I also want to share a couple of little tools, simple tools that I've used in the past to sell value back to an organization. This one here is what we call an energy savings due to lubrication calculator. And the way this works is we would do it in two pieces. One, we would get, a Mager or something like that, and get an amp draw over a period of time on bigger components, things like ammonia compressors or big motors, things like that. And knowing that our lubrication standards weren't up to par, we would couple that with, ultrasonic precision greasing, because these are critical components to get a baseline and things. And we would know the need for lubrication, but also when we went to lubricate, we wanted to make sure we had the right amount at the right interval, those types of things. So what you do here is you measure the amperage before you lubricate the machine, and you document it. And there's a cost to that. There's some formulas down below. It'll be a little different on a state-by-state basis and by country, depending on voltages and things like that. But it can be done. And then doing the proper lubrication to the asset, you pull another amp draw to see how many amps you dropped based on its, proper lubrication. And so that cost can be calculated. And we would calculate it here on equipment and use this tool to provide savings. And then throughout the month and the year, we would compare it to our electricity bill to make sure that we were seeing what we were claiming that we were saving. And 9 times out of the 10, we were very conservative on our savings, and we would actually save more. But it depends on how you're metered and things like that. There's some variables there, but this tool worked great. And so this was a way to share with the organization some of the great things we were doing with our lubrication program coupled with our ultrasound program. And so we were selling value back to the business. They invest, we invest $20,000, $30,000 into a tool and another, $20,000 into training. So we're $50,000 in. Well, just this alone, not fixing air leaks, none of this stuff. This alone, you're reducing your energy bill that almost pays for the tool itself, on top of the plethora of other things that you can be doing with the tools in order to capture value. So this was always a great one that we would use to share back with the company and show that our reliability program or our maintenance program was doing a phenomenal job at cutting costs, and that there's financial value in becoming more reliable. Here's another example. So we had particle testers at a facility that I was on at every sump for our hydraulic systems. We had a bunch of hydraulic presses, and these hydraulic presses we would use to compress dough to make pizza crust. It was a pizza manufacturing plant. And so we were running, millions of compressions through these presses, and we were seeing failures like crazy. So when I started with them, they would average a failure about every 3 months, and it cost them 12 hours of downtime on a press. And so we used this particle counter, took 3 different samples and got an average of what the particles were. Now, this is in a 100 milliliter bottle, but the cleanliness code that was coming out of our sumps was a 232116. And so if you do some math, right, what you end up finding is 174 billion particles in we had 1,000-gallon reservoirs for our hydraulic system for each press. And so what we were doing, we were seeing failures in seals and in shafts and things like that. We're basically sandblasting the entire system at 2,000 PSI over and over and over again with all these particles in the system, which was nuts. And so if you look at the ISO cleanliness code, it's ISO 4406-99, gives you the Renard table. This table is great at understanding that for every milliliter, how many particles are, based on its micron, are within a sample. And so I would train people to this, get them to understand how important it is to get their oil clean. And also there's a life extension table that exists that shows that, if you look in the bottom, there's a legend to the quadrant. So hydraulics and diesel engines at a 2320, which we were at 2321, if we got our cleanliness down to a 1411, which was our goal on hydraulics, that we would get 10 years plus life extension on these hydraulic presses. And so our goal here was to extend the asset life. And we did so. And what we saw was once we got the oil clean and got things closed up, so that contaminants weren't continually ingressing into the process, what we found was just by filtering the oil, it had a kidney loop system, but the filtering system on it was incorrect. So we had to fix that. And then we filtered oil nonstop through these. But what we were able to do, and so far, this was almost 5 years ago now, but when I was there, up to that 3-year mark, they'd had 0 failures and 0 downtime, only because we cleaned the oil with these failure modes. So these presses were running tremendously, and we weren't losing all of this availability to produce, which comes out to a savings of about $576,000 back to the company, which is huge for a single plant operation. That's a lot of money. And so, but the key is to wrap it up here, is how do you communicate this to the organization? And what you got to understand is when you're speaking to people, you have to understand the level in which you're speaking to. There's basically 3 different ways to communicate to 3 different groups. And this is a lot of the gap here. So as a maintenance manager, okay, when I'm speaking up, I'm talking about plant manager up to corporate management. Really what they want to know a majority of the time is the financial value, and then tying that also to the overall objectives. So most companies have an objective that says we want to be the lowest cost producer, something generically stated like that. And it could be a little more defined, but it comes down to cost. A lot of people are worried about cost. And then as the times we're in now, cost is becoming even more prevalent as an objective. So how can we lower costs? And so tying it to financial value into those objectives and communicating that up, that's the key. So tying a dollar amount to it, hey, listen, we saved $576,000 on the presses over the last 3 years. On top of that, it's tying to our overall objective of lowering costs. And you're seeing that in our maintenance cost per unit or whatever it is that you produce, right? And tying those things in. And then speaking out at your peer level as a maintenance manager, the operations manager, the safety manager, the quality manager, and even the plant manager at times, it's about reducing downtime and reducing stress. especially when you're in a reactive environment. In a reactive environment, stress is key, so if you can give them better quality of life by reducing downtime, most of them will support you. The thing is do you have the credibility? And again, it goes back to getting those quick wins to develop that credibility. That way, when you say we're going to do this and the results will be that, people trust in you. And so they're hoping and they're supporting and all those types of things. When you're speaking to the people that answer to you, a lot of times it's all about quality of life, making their job easier, making it less stressful, not being so reactive, not having to play superhero all the time, being able to do the more fun things, the predictive maintenance routes, the failure analysis, all these types of things that are fun, instead of constantly getting beat up out on the floor. And so understanding how to communicate it, not only capturing the savings, but how do you communicate it, I think is key. And its its impact to the organization. And so with that, I know that was quick. I appreciate you being here. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to take them at this time.
We have a question from Rich. He said, did you need to wait for grease to purge before testing amps for energy savings? That immediately after adding
grease. Did you need
grease
to wait for the grease to purge before testing amps on energy savings? Yes. There's a couple checks that you have to do. One, you have to make sure that you understand how to lubricate each one of these components, because every one's a little different, but two, yes, it always drop your amperage right away as you lubricate, but it'll always creep back up. So you want to wait. I normally waited about an hour, but I would test them for 24 hours with the tester. The testers that we had it's basically a logger. It would log it throughout the day so that I could take an average of what the amperage was, and that's what we used, was an average, because if you take it right away when you grease, you're gonna see a lot lower amperage than a day later. As the lubricant settles in, it'll start to creep up a little bit, not much, but it does. But you also want to be honest in your reporting, because your energy bill will keep you honest. So if you're over exaggerating your savings and you're not seeing it on your energy bill, then people won't trust you. So you have to be careful how you do that.
Do we have any
Hopefully
more
I answered your
questions from
question,
anybody?
Rich. You're the expert on this, man. So I'm just a practitioner. Any other questions before we go?
If we don't have any more.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Again, if I probably didn't have time to answer all questions, so if you want, connect with us, and I'll be more than happy to answer whatever questions you have. I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me. I know there were some great speakers at the same time as me, had a lot of competition. So I appreciate you being here with me.
All right. Do you have a closing statement you would want to make besides that? Like anything they need to know?
Do you have a question?
Does any of accept example from other plants?
Does any accept, are you talking about management? Does any management accept examples from other plants? Or do I have examples from other plants? I just want to be clear on the question.
Before that, he said this. This is a follow-up. Any levels you talk, management, technician, other?
I typically, well, now that I'm a consultant, I have examples, but typically I'm using my own examples. Well, I create my own examples because I want to share them with management. Like I said, a part of the problem is we ask permission and we get told no instead of just going and doing it and then asking for forgiveness. As long as you're confident in knowing you're going to receive that savings, I don't really need examples from other plants. Now, if I had them, say another maintenance manager and I were both doing the same things, I would definitely use them as a selling point. But what I like to do is create it all organically through my own programs. So it lends to more credibility in the fact that I know what I'm doing. So it makes it easier to sell anything. How to avoid contamination regression on lube oil tanks.
We're actually out of time.
Sure, it will directly reduce. Are you talking about storage tanks?
Joe? Can you hear me?
Have you ever been blamed for lubrication related to a failure resulting in major cost repairs and loss? I can't hear you. We've got to wrap up. So I'll tell you what, those of you that haven't answered, I'm going to go ahead and leave, but I can stay and answer in the chat. That way you get your questions answered. If I don't answer it correctly or you want more information, let's set up time and talk. So I want to make sure that I help you in any way I can. So again, I appreciate y'all being here. We got to wrap up. And thank you again for everything.
Bye.